Mandy here. Happy spring and happy Easter. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm excited to share with you a little Easter egg mini album that I created for Country Craft Creations using their exclusive paper collection called Country Bunny. This is a gorgeous paper collection. It comes in a 12 by 12 size. If you haven't checked it out yet, I suggest that you go take a look at it and maybe pick it up for yourself for your crafting of Easter or spring or any occasion album. So here I designed this to be in an egg shape. I did cut it out on my Cricut Joy. I give more details on that later about how you could cut one if you don't have a cutting machine, or what to look for to cut out this shape. It's just a basic egg shape, so it's not really that hard. It is created out of artisan white cardstock in the center. It has pattern paper on both sides on the cover, and all the pages are made the same. So it's nice and heavy. It's not made out of chipboard, but it is nice and heavy. So here on the front cover, I used the paper with this bunny image. I added some trim, flower trims from my stash. Also some roses from a stash that the colors worked really well with this collection. Added in some of those flower trim that I cut apart. Ruffled up a little doily underneath there. Fussy cut out this butterfly. And then tucked in some neutral button string here on the side. And it is bound with rings. I had initially planned to do ribbon, but then realized that that wouldn't turn well, so I changed it to 1-inch binder rings. And then I tied 3 different colors of seam binding ribbon onto each ring, and then also on some strings, on the button string, I tied on some charms and beads. I have 4 sets of those here, different lengths here in this binding like that. Okay, so that's the front cover. Try to stay in frame here for you. When you open this up, the first page on the inside has a little pocket made out of a doily and a fussy cut out bunny here with a button string and a vintage button. Some more of that flower trim that I cut apart and put in here. I have a tag that comes out. This is a fussy cut butterfly added on. I added some of the lace here on the bottom, a scrap of it, and then I did strengthen it with some of the art glitter glue and let that dry so that it doesn't bend as much. Added a scrap of paper here, and on all my flowers and butterflies I did add a touch of just the wink of Stella to give it a little sparkle, and it has a seam binding bow tied in here at the top, so that just tucks in right there. The next page has a pocket that I cut out of a scrap of paper and rounded the bottom so that it would fit the egg shape. Trimmed it with some of that flower trim from a stash, and then I made this little booklet here that opens from the bottom, so you could add photos if you wanted to. This is just made out of a piece of the scrap of the paper after I cut everything out. I added another button string bow and another one of those little flowers cut from some trim. So this is real pretty. This just tucks in like that. So this is really simple and easy to make, but a lot of fun. Here I have a belly band that I created out of scrap of paper. I added a fussy cut butterfly and 2 vintage buttons. And on this one, in my box of vintage buttons, I had used all the buttons, and this is a button card. Very vintage. Buttons were 10 cents. I cut apart and matted that on there to cover up the holes, see where the buttons were attached. And then I fussy cut out this butterfly here and tied in some of the blue seam binding, but then I glued it down and kind of ruffled it up a little bit, and then added this fussy cut butterfly. So this just tucks in right here underneath the belly band. And this page, I did a lot of fussy cutting out of some flowers. You see them here kind of sticking up. They're loose. You could tuck a photo underneath there. Fussy cut out the bunny. Added some of those flower trims. Fussy cut this beautiful butterfly and just left it loose here on the right. So You can kind of make that dimensional if you wanted to when you're looking at it, and added 3 vintage buttons here at the top, and then this is background is the paper with the butterfly. Next page is a pocket with a bunny rabbit cutout. I cut him out, fussy cut him out, and just glued it in areas where to create the pocket. I added a seam binding bow, vintage button, and then inside the pocket I've just tucked in one of the loose doilies just to give it that dainty look. This is a cut apart that I just rounded the corners, and that just tucks in right there behind the bunny. There we go. Over here I fussy cut out the pocket watch. Made it into a pocket by just gluing on the right side. Fussy cut out some flowers and added those in for extra dimension. Fussy cut out this large butterfly. You can lift up the wings a little bit here on this one. And this is a little small journaling spot, or a little tiny photo. Used a scrap of the music paper that comes on some of the papers. So then this just lifts up underneath here and tucks in, just like that. Here I made another belly band, rounded the bottom and the top of it, added some lace trim, button twine, and another vintage button. And then underneath I created a photo mat out of a scrap of the paper in white artisan cardstock. And then this was a cut apart where I stub punched the corners and trimmed it down to fit. This side is more just a floral piece. You could add a photo if you wanted to. I glued down the little doily, then fussy cut a bunch of the flowers and leaves and glued them over on top of it. So it's mostly just a flat page here with added embellishments on top. This one I also left plain. I didn't add anything on here except for the 3 vintage buttons, but I did add the Wink of Stella. So this is a good place for a photo. Here I created another pocket using this butterfly image on the paper. Added the trim on the top of the pocket. And in here I have a photo mat that I cut out of a scrap of paper, stub punched the corners. And the whole album and all the papers are inked with the Distress ink in the pumice stone color. And so you add that, then this has another loose doily because I just love how that looks tucked in. Then I fussy cut out this greenery and the leaves, and I'm just tucking that in to just add to it. On this one I have a doily again that's glued down, then I circle punched out this little flower image here and glued that down. You could put a photo over this. Underneath down here I added the button string bow and another vintage button. Here we have another bottom pocket that's rounded. I added the seam binding that I glued spots of it and made it loose and ruffly, and then added 2 vintage buttons. Here is a fold out. This is 2 cut aparts that I left together and made this booklet and stub punched the corners, so that just tucks in right there. This page is another button card that I had. I loved it. It had flowers and greenery on it. I glued it down, added a mat, a photo mat, with stub punched corners, the button string, and a vintage button. Then I also took a scrap of the paper and just made a little mat here for extra color and texture, and this just tucks in right here underneath, just like that. Here I made a belly band out of that trim. You could use any kind of lace and just glue it on each end. And then here I added in a little fold out. It's a trifold that I made out of scrap of paper and stub punched it. That just tucks in under there. And then this is another cut apart, I believe, and then I made it into this tag with the stub punched corners. And then on the back, from the cover paper that shows you all the patterns in the package, I cut out Country Bunny and Country Craft Creations because I wanted that on the back. So there is my Easter egg album out of Country Bunny by Country Craft Creations, available now in the online store at countrycraftcreations.com. I think you'll really like it, and stay tuned for the tutorial. For this Easter egg album that I'm going to show you how to create, I am using the Country Bunny 12x12 paper collection that is exclusive for Country Craft Creations. And I used about 8 sheets of the 12x12. Now some I didn't use them all the way. This is the cover sheet. And so I'm going to just show you real quick. These are some of the papers. You pick out the ones you want to use, because you're going to be cutting it down to fit into whatever cutting machine you have, or if you're going to use an egg template. So these are the papers in the collection. The larger items I did not use. And so I'm going to pick this all up. Mine are already cut. So let me get these out of the way. So you do want a pattern paper collection, and like I said, I used about 8 sheets, but of those 8 sheets I did have like this quarter bottom piece here of 1, 2, and then almost a half of this one, and almost I only used the cut aparts on one end of this one here. So so you don't use quite a full 8 sheets on this. For the cardstock, I used white artisan cardstock, and I needed 2 sheets for that. Now what I did is, after I cut my egg shapes, and I'll go over that with you, the size and everything that I used, out of the scraps I fussy cut a bunch of flowers, like this pocket watch, flowers and leaves and bunnies and butterflies that I wanted to use to decorate mine. And then I also had some scraps of the paper that I cut down that I may use. So you want to keep your smaller scraps that you may want to use to make pockets or belly bands and everything like that. So for this project, for mine, I cut out of the white artisan cardstock. My egg shapes are about 4 inches wide by 5.5 inches tall. And I did cut them out on my Cricut Joy. So that is the biggest that I could cut out on mine. And this is about the size I wanted it anyway. You're going to need, for the white, you need to cut 8. So it's like you have a front back cover and 6 pages doubled. So you cut 8 of this solid, and then I cut 16 of the pattern, the different patterns. I cut mine the same size. I'm not real familiar with changing the sizes to make sure, and I didn't want to ruin any of my pattern paper. So I decided to just use the cardstock to make the sturdier pages, and then put a pattern piece of paper on both sides like this. So they're going to be glued together. And I am going to be using the Art Glitter Glue from Country Craft Creations. So you would glue your papers together, sandwich the cardstock in between to make it real sturdy. Okay? Now then, if you don't have a Cricut or a Silhouette or some machine that you can use to cut with, you can go online. There's a ton of egg coloring templates in the big size. And what I would do is print that up on like a cardstock, cut it out, and make me a template and hand cut. That's going to be a lot of hand cutting, but you can do it. An oval die is not going to work because you want the egg shape. You want it smaller at the top and bigger at the bottom. There are some dies I think available in egg shapes, but like on my Cricut Joy, I just went on to, and this could be on any Cricut, go to Design Space, and then I think it was images or pictures or something like that. I clicked on that and scrolled through and found egg shape. It was like a double mat, a double thing, which I could have probably done for my pattern paper, but I didn't think about that. So I just cut the base shape out. That's all I wanted, was the main shape. You're going to find a lot that has designs and things, and that cuts it all out, and that's not going to work. So you want a solid egg shape like this. You can make it any size you want. Like I said, mine is 4 inches wide by 5.5 tall. You can make it a little bigger if you wanted to, if you have a bigger cutting machine. So that's what I'm going to use for that. Then I went and pulled out my ribbons to go with my paper. I have like a real light peachy kind of pink here. I think it's called, let me see here. I have my rolls here called Lyric Rose. It's seam binding ribbon. And then the blue is a real light blue, and that one was called, mine is called Lace Blue. And then the green, I wanted the green because I'm going to make my binding with my ribbon. And the green is moss green. So I thought those three colors looked really pretty with the paper. And then I have the natural button string. I always end up using button string. So I have it pulled out. Whether I use it or not, I don't know. Put that aside, roll this aside. Then I went to my flower stash and pulled out some velvety leaves that I think will look good, that I might want to use, as well as some roses. So here's some buds. This is kind of a peachy pink color. These roses, this would just be for the front of the little album. I pulled out 2 big ones and 3 buds. Doesn't mean I will use them all, but it's what I have on hand. And then I also did these blue, because I think the blue rose is kind of a grayish blue color. I pulled out some of the little doodlebug doilies that I have here that's also available from Country Craft Creations. And then I looked in my stash of vintage buttons. I was lucky one time to get a whole box of vintage buttons still on the cards at an estate sale. And so some of them had some buttons missing, you know, some were full. And I like to go through those. I found this one here that they're all gone. I don't know if I used them up or something. It says, you know, washable 10 cents Pacific buttons. And I thought, well, that's kind of neat. And I might could use it for a background, like add an image or a piece of paper here on that, you know, cut it, use this as the mat. So that's a possibility on that. So look at your stash and see what you have that you might want to use. And so these are the vintage buttons. I may or may not use them. We'll see as I get into the decorating. So now we're ready to get started on it. Just go ahead and get your egg shapes cut first, and then we're going to start doing some gluing on those. Okay, so I have my patterns here. I have 16 each and 8 of the white artisan cardstock. I'm ready to just start gluing them together, having to look at each image and decide how I want to do this to which one I want to put on the front, etc., and the inside. So I'm going to save that one. This is the front piece. I think I'm going to do this butterfly here. So I am going to be doing this off camera because there's no point in letting it go while you watch me glue. So I'm just going to show you the first one, and then I will glue them all together. So I'm putting glue. I'm using the fine tip and the art glitter glue, and I'm just putting glue on here. You have to work pretty fast with the art glitter glue, so I'm going to line it up. And remember, I don't have a border around mine. Mine are cut all the same size. And I'll probably do some inking afterwards, after I decide what I want to do. So I'm just burnishing this really well. And grab another tool so that it doesn't have any lines in the glue. And then of course I'm going to turn it over and I will do the back side. I think I'll use the bunny rabbit here. So just go ahead and cut your egg shapes, your pattern paper egg shapes, get them all cut the size you want, and then go ahead and glue pattern paper to the front and back of each one. And go ahead and get all those lined up and burnished on there. So here's the first one, and like I said, I will probably ink mine after they're glued on. So I have the Pumice Stone Distress ink. I really like in this color with some of these paper collection. And I'm just going to go around after I glue it on and just ink the edges. And that kind of covers up if you have any that are kind of a little off, just a little bit. Even though they were all cut the same size, it's just me turning and getting it glued on the same is the issue, not the actual cutting. But this looks really good inked like that. So I will be gluing my pattern papers on the front and back of each egg base piece. This is the cardstock. And then I will go ahead and ink all of mine. Okay, so everything's glued on, front and back. Very hard decision. I pretty much went with the A side of the paper, which is the brighter images. So I just had to decide which would go where. So I've got them all in line where I want them. I have this large bunny on the front. I did decide on that. Butterflies. And then this little bunny here with the flowers. And then I have just, you know, a butterfly here and some of the greenery there. Butterflies, still more flowers. Beautiful, beautiful collection for something like this. So it's, you know, you've always got some pretty images wherever. It's going to be hard to cover these up, but we're going to have to make our little album. So here's some more greeneries with some butterflies on that. And then this has the scrolly piece here, which will probably be covered up with something. But all this greenery here, the bunny here again, and in the back I did use the B side and kind of left it plain on the back. So now we're ready to do our hole punching, and we're going to punch a hole through the first one first, then line it up with the second one, and so on, so that you can't punch through all that, or at least I don't think I can. Using my Where Are Memory Keepers Crop-A-Dile, that's what I call it. I think that's the name of it. I'm going to use the bigger hole, which is your 3/16 of an inch hole. And if you have one of these tools and you didn't know it, right here you have this screw here. You unscrew and you place the guide where you want. So I have mine at about 3/8, it looks like, in, which gives you about 3/8 inch from the edge. I didn't want it way over in there, but then you want enough so it's not going to tear through. But with this triple thickness here, you shouldn't have any problems with it tearing through with your ribbons. So I just need to look at it and see where I want to put it. And I was debating one hole or two, and I'm going to go ahead and do two, but they're not going to be very far apart. So this stop here, once you have it set, make sure you're on the right side, they're going to be the same distance as long as you tighten this down really tight. So I'm going to go just under this butterfly here, and then I'm going to scoot over maybe about an inch and punch there. So that's where my holes are going to go for my binding. Okay, then I take this second one, line them up good. Now if you need to use some clips to hold them in place, do that, because you want to line this up the shape of the egg. Good. And then I'm going to look where my holes were before, because you look down through that hole, and if you have to make it where you can see it, I'm just going to kind of color in a little bit. It's not going to hurt anything. So now I can see the dark, line that up, and punch. Okay, so I'm going to pause the camera and go ahead and do them all the same. So I'm going to take the first one off, lay it aside, line up my next one. So just go ahead and punch all your holes. Double holes punched in my egg shapes, and they're lined up pretty good. And I initially had thought about doing ribbon binding, but decided because of the shape that's not going to work very well. So I've got two white or ivory colored binder rings. And these are about, let's see, to measure the size. I didn't want real big ones. So these are 1 inch or 1 1/4, about a 1 inch circle. So 1, 1 1/4, whatever you might have. If you don't have the white, gold or black or whatever will work, because I am going to tie ribbons on them. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to line up through the holes. Go make sure you're grabbing every one. So I'm doing the top holes first, and then I'm going to close that up. Now, ring binding is not my favorite, but with shaped albums, sometimes that is what you have to go with. So I'm just making sure they all go through and close that off. Okay, now then, just double checking to see, because it gives more room for them to open. The ribbon, I know after I punched everything, I knew that the ribbon would not give us the looseness that we need to turn these pages. And this is why I always have an issue with binding rings. It's that back part of it. I'm going to try to make sure and get it to the back where you need to turn. There we go. It's usually in the way, so I'm going to make sure it stays to the back. So now I'm happy with that. That lays down pretty nice. So I didn't give these in the supplies at the first, but I'll add it across the screen so that you'll know ahead of time that you're going to need that. So now I'm not going to put my ribbons on. I have the 3 colors, and I do have to work with, I cut a yard of each color times 2. So I have a yard of each of the blue, each length 2 blues or a yard each. The Lyric Pink, I have 2 of those, they're a yard each. And my Moss Green, I have 2 of those, and those are a yard each. And that should give us plenty to tie and work with. We may want more ribbon as we're doing that, but this is the assembled little album. So now we're ready to decorate. I am done with the decorating part, and now we're ready to add our ribbons to our rings. I'll take 1 of each color. Line them up on even on the end. Give me a blue. And then I'm going to loop it through here. And get them even the best I can. I'm just going to tie a knot. Then I'm going to tie a bow. This one's kind of short, so let me see if I can. I'm going to do that and try that again. I don't know why my blue one ended up being so short. There it is. So take the 2 loops. There. Just didn't, the loop didn't come through all the way. And pull. I'm leaving the tails for right now till I decide, and then I'm going to do the same here on this one. So line them up together. And remember, this was about a yard of each color. on 6 strips, so you have 6 yards total here. So let's loop this one, tie a knot. Okay, pull that one. Okay, now, so I'm still leaving the tails a little long right now, and I'm going to look and see what I have for charms that I might want to add, and then this project will be finished. Okay, so I found in my stash 6 different beads, 3 butterfly charms, each one's different in the silver. The beads I may or may not use, I'll just decide on that. I think I'm going to tie them on button string. So the first thing I'm going to do, I have about looks like 1.5 yards maybe of string. I'm going to double it. So actually I just need 2 pieces. And I'm only going to put this on the top ring here. So I'm going to bring this through here somehow, through the ring, and then I will tie it in a knot even over the knot of the seam binding bow. See how that looks. So sometimes you just have to play with it to see if you like how something looks. So I think that's going to work, and I'm going to double knot it. Okay. Just like that. So now I have 4 strings because I'm going to cut this one loop down. Just like that. So you could just use 2 strings, but I don't know why I always use the looped and then let it go like that. So now, can I thread these or not? So I'm going to grab a small bead, I think, first, and we're going to see the hole may be too small. See if my button string will go through. Now, one trick is to take some of the art glitter glue and coat the end of that string and let that dry. To it. Hadn't got any coming out yet. What that does is that stiffens that string, keeps it from raveling, and makes it more like a sharp needle. Okay, so I'm going to let that dry a minute. I'm going to go ahead and do all 4 of them in case I need it on those. Just put a blob of glue and then take your fingers and just kind of rub it, stiffen it up, and let that dry. And one more. And if there's a loose stringy hanging down, you just, after it dries, just cut that off. So clean my fingers off real quick. And we'll see if we can thread some beads on that string. Oops. And let it hang down and add those butterflies. So, yeah, let's see if there's any little stringy sticking out. Clean those up. Not quite dry. Okay. Now I'm going to need a knot, whichever string I'm going to start with here. Up in here, I'm going to need a knot for my bead to stop. So just tie a knot on the string and grab my bead, thread it through, and stiffening it up like that helps bring it on up, just like that. And then I may have to pull out some more beads. I'm going to use a silver one here. Thread that one through. Yep. Now I'm going to tie another knot the best that I can underneath these beads. Try to pull it right up as tight as I can into where the bead is. Good enough. Okay. And then I'll take a butterfly. And I may have to go to my stash and find another one since I have 4 strands. But I'm going to thread that through. And I'm not going to pull it all the way up to the beads. I'm just going to tie it right here. Oh, about, let's see. About 3/4 to an inch below the beads. Now I'm going to double knot that. And I will use some art glitter glue on that knot to secure it because it can come untied. So there we go. Pull it tight and then take a little dab of this glue and secure that knot in there. So then that's going to hang down. So we have the end of the string. Once that glue dries, I will probably cut that off. And I may just go ahead and glue it down to the back of this charm a little bit, so it's not real short when I cut it, if it'll glue. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. So I may just go ahead and cut it off kind of like a little short tail, and that will fray out. Or should. I may have glue on it and it may not, so that's okay. So make sure that it's tight and you've gotten glue into that knot. It will dry clear. I'm too terribly long. I want the charms to kind of show. Let's see, that's about what? Looks like 3 inches. I tie a knot and trim it off at an angle. So this is okay if they ravel up to the knot. So I'm going to do that real quick on all of these, and then I'll be back with the finished album. Okay, I think I've got them all the tails tied in knots and trimmed, and then just go through and kind of separate, fluff up your bow loops. They're going to kind of tend to go back in together, but just kind of fluff them up a little bit. There's your tails, there's your charms hanging in there, and that's the finished little Easter egg album. Well, thank you so much for following along with me, and I encourage you to shop at countrycraftcreations.com. You're going to find the Country Bunny paper collection there. It's exclusive to Country Craft Creations. That's the only place you can order it, is online there. It is a wonderful 12 by 12 paper collection. You're going to find lots of uses for it. Folios. There's been a lot of projects made by the Country Craft Creations design team. For a list of them and their YouTube channels, go to Country Craft Creations website, which is countrycraftcreations.com. Click on About Us and then click on Design Team, and you'll see the names of the designers and their links to their YouTube channels. And you're going to find a lot of wonderful projects with these exclusive paper collections that are coming out at Country Craft Creations. So again, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to my channel. Click on the bell when you do. That way you'll know when my next project is ready for you and you can check it out. Thanks again. Bye-bye.